Taylor Sheridan is directing a war movie. That sentence alone should be enough to stop you mid-scroll. But here's the part nobody saw coming. You're not going to see it in a theater. You're not going to stream it. You're not going to watch it anywhere near a couch or a bucket of popcorn. And when you hear where it's actually going to be shown and what it's going to do to everyone inside that room, you're going to understand why this might be the most unusual creative decision a major filmmaker has made in years. Let's talk about Taylor Sheridan. Because if you've spent any time watching prestige television or serious American cinema in the last decade, you already know what that name means. This is the man who wrote Sicario, the 2015 cartel thriller that made the Texas-Mexico border feel like the edge of civilization itself. He wrote Hell or High Water, the neo-Western heist film that felt like a eulogy for a dying American dream. He wrote Wind River, which he also directed, and which is one of the most quietly devastating crime films of the modern era. And then, of course, he built Yellowstone, the sprawling modern Western that became one of the most-watched television dramas in American history and spawned an entire universe of spin-offs that now occupies more of the Paramount network than arguably anything else. Taylor Sheridan does not make small things. He does not make safe things. Every project he touches is about land and power and violence, and the particular kind of American stubbornness that refuses to bend even when bending would save everyone involved. He is, more than almost any other filmmaker working today, the storyteller of the American West. So when word broke that Sheridan is directing a new project centered on the Battle of the Alamo, the reaction in certain corners of the internet was close to electric. Because of course he is. Of course, this is the story he was always going to get to eventually. The Alamo is the ultimate Taylor Sheridan story. A small group of men, outgunned and outmanned, choosing to hold a position they cannot hold, against an army they cannot stop, for reasons that are equal parts principle and pride, and something that doesn't have a clean name, but that Sheridan has been circling in every project he's ever made. It is a story about last dance, about what people are willing to die for, and whether dying for it means anything. It is, in every structural sense, his material. The Battle of the Alamo, for anyone who needs the context, this took place in February and March of 1836 in San Antonio, Texas, during the Texas Revolution. A garrison of Texian defenders, somewhere between 180 and 260 men, depending on the account, held a former Spanish mission against a Mexican army under General Santa Anna that numbered in the thousands. The siege lasted 13 days. When it ended, the garrison was gone. James Bowie, William Barrett Travis, Davy Crockett, names that passed into American mythology almost immediately, turned into symbols of something the newly forming Republic of Texas needed. Proof that the cause was worth the cost. Remember the Alamo became a rallying cry. The battle itself became a story that Americans have been arguing about, romanticizing, re-examining, and retelling ever since. It is one of the most contested, most layered, most emotionally loaded events in American history. It deserves a filmmaker who can hold that complexity without flattening it. And Sheridan, who has never been interested in simple heroics, might be exactly the right person to do it. But here is where the story turns. Here is the detail that changes everything. This film is not coming to a theater near you. It is not getting a wide release. It is not being positioned for award season or a streaming debut or any of the conventional pathways through which a project of this scale would normally reach an audience. Instead, it is being built specifically for a 4D immersive theater experience, housed at the Alamo itself. At the museum on the actual site in San Antonio where those 13 days happened. Read that again. The movie is going to be shown at the Alamo. Now, for a filmmaker of Sheridan's stature, someone who could greenlight almost anything, who has the relationships and the reputation to put a film in every multiplex in North America, this is a genuinely startling choice. Directors at his level don't typically build site-specific experiences. They make films. Films that travel, that reach millions, that compete for cultural real estate on a global scale. The decision to deliberately limit this project's reach, to anchor it to a single physical location, runs completely counter to everything the modern entertainment industry incentivizes. And that is exactly what makes it interesting. So what is a 4D immersive experience? And why does it matter here? Because this isn't just a movie with a rumble in your seat when the cannons fire. True 4D immersive cinema, at its most ambitious, is a fundamentally different proposition from sitting in a dark room watching a screen. We're talking about environmental sound design that surrounds you completely, not just in front of you, but behind you, above you, in directions that cinema speakers typically ignore. We're talking about physical sensation synchronized to the action, air movement, vibration, temperature shifts. We're talking about a visual field that pushes beyond the frame of a conventional screen, that implicates the space you're physically occupying rather than just projecting at you from a distance. Done at the level Sheridan would demand, you would not watch the siege of the Alamo. You would be inside it. The cannon fire would be something you feel in your sternum. The cold of a February night in Texas would be something the room communicates to your skin. The chaos of the final assault would not be happening to people on a screen. It would be happening around you while you sit on ground that is, in the most literal possible sense, the actual ground where it happened. That is a completely different artistic object than a film. It is closer to theater, closer to installation art, closer to a memorial than an entertainment product. And that distinction matters enormously when you think about what Sheridan has always done with his stories. His work is not interested in spectacle for its own sake. Sicario is terrifying not because of how many bullets are fired, but because of how thoroughly it destroys your sense of who the good guys are. Wind River is devastating not because of its violence, but because of its silence. The weight of things that don't get said, grief that doesn't have a proper container in the world the characters inhabit. Sheridan makes films where the atmosphere is the argument, where the landscape itself is a character. And if you want to tell the story of the Alamo in a way that honors that instinct, putting the audience inside the physical space where it happened is not a gimmick. It might actually be the only honest approach. Compare that to how war films typically work. The genre has given us masterpieces. Apocalypse Now, Saving Private Ryan, 1917. Films that use scale and technical achievement to create visceral proximity to combat. But all of them, even the greatest ones, ask you to imaginatively bridge the gap between yourself and the screen. The 4D immersive format collapses that gap. It doesn't ask you to imagine you're there. It insists on it. For a story as mythologized as the Alamo, a story that has been retold so many times that the myth has started to obscure the human reality underneath, that collapse might be exactly what the material needs to breathe again. But there is a real tension here. There is a legitimate question on the other side of this decision. Because the Alamo story is a story with complicated edges. The mythology around it has been used in ways that flatten the perspectives of the Mexican soldiers, that smooth over the political and moral complexities of the Texas Revolution, that turn a messy historical event into a clean American legend. A filmmaker of Sheridan's sophistication almost certainly has no interest in reproducing that myth uncritically. His work consistently interrogates American mythology rather than celebrating it. But if the film never reaches a wide audience, if it remains permanently site-specific and accessible only to the visitors who make the trip to San Antonio, then that interrogation, that more honest, more complicated version of the story, stays in one room. It doesn't travel. It doesn't reach the people who most need their assumptions about this history challenged. That's the real risk. Not box office, not streaming numbers. The risk is irrelevance. The risk that a potentially important artistic statement gets experienced by a self-selecting audience of tourists who already made the pilgrimage to the Alamo and walks past everyone else. And yet there's an argument that this model, a major creative talent, working at the highest level, building something that is permanently tethered to a place that cannot be commodified into content, that must be sought out and physically experienced, represents something genuinely new. Something the film industry, currently drowning in the consequences of treating everything as streaming content, might desperately need. If this works, If people travel to San Antonio specifically to sit inside Sheridan's vision of those 13 days, it proves that cinema can be a destination again, not a convenience. A destination. That changes the conversation about what movies are for. So the question sitting at the center of all of this isn't just about Taylor Sheridan or the Alamo or 4D technology. It's a bigger question. It's the question this project forces you to ask about the entire direction of storytelling, of cinema, of how we decide what a powerful story is worth and how far we're willing to go to experience it. Is this the future of cinema? Immersive, site-specific, irreducible to a file on a server? Or is it a missed opportunity? A brilliant filmmaker, a monumental story, and an audience that will never get to sit inside it. What do you think? Let me know in the comments, because this one is worth arguing about.